Despite the wishes of the equipment makers and regulators, there's still a lot of TDM circuits and equipment in the global telecommunications network. How do we know? We talk to service providers every day that are working on mixed TDM and IP networks. What we found is that service providers are often challenged with navigating the complications of migrating their network to IP infrastructure, dealing with new regulatory mandates, replacing obsolete technologies, and finding the expertise to make the transition. To help our customers make this transition, TelcoBridges has invited ZT Technology Solutions to join us as our newest alliance partner, bringing a host of experience in planning service provider migrations from TDM to IP. During today's event, we'll discuss our network transformation strategy, get to meet the team from ZT, and hear their 5 best network transformation practices. Best of all, we've saved some time to answer your questions. So, let's get going. All right, so I'm Alan Percy. I'm the CMO for TelcoBridges and the host for today's event. And I'm so thrilled to have you, our listeners, with us today. And we're joined by Mike Dazio. He's the CEO from ZT Technology Solutions. And Mike, thanks so much for bringing your expertise to the table today.
It is my pleasure to be here and to talk to some of our member friends in various service providers and other companies.
That's great. Thanks so much. And David Sommerfeld, he's the VP of Operations for ZT. And David, thanks again also too for you stopping in today and sharing some of your expertise.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to giving this presentation and answering questions for the listeners.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks so much. All right. We took a look through our registrations, and we've got, as always, some new folks that have joined us. And so we want to just do a quick overview of some of an introduction of TelcoBridges and our partners here today. So TelcoBridges, as we know, we're a manufacturer of VoIP gateways and session border controller technology, privately held and founded in 2002. And matter of fact, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary a few weeks ago with roughly 40 employees. Headquarters is based, of course, in Boucherville, Quebec. And that's where most of the hardware and software development is done, along with administration and finance is all done in our office in Boucherville. But we also have marketing support and sales offices in my hometown, Buffalo, and also Hong Kong, Italy, Turkey, and Vietnam. And that's how we provide our 24/7 support. All right. And so next, David, you want to give us Michael, you want to give us an introduction to ZT?
Yeah. Alan, thank you for inviting us. As I said before, a little bit about ZT. We really specialize in the legacy game. Fundamentally, a few of us came out of the Western Electric, Lucent, AT&T world, and we realized that there was an opportunity to really extend the life of legacy equipment by providing consultation, support, spare parts. And we really created the business to focus in on that. However, over the last 20 years, what we're realizing is now is the time to move on. People have talked about the PSTN for the last 40, 50 years. The fact is, it's been the workhorse of the telecom network. But the reality also is that the PSTN, due to lack of talent, lack of expertise, aging population of support people, inability to get parts, now is the time, we feel very strongly, now is the time to begin the migration or to begin the planning of the migration off to the PSTN to the IP world.
Right. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much. And as we mentioned, you're our newest member to our Alliance Partner Program. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining. All right, quick overview of our today's agenda. We, of course, are going to start with, we did our introductions, and we're going to pop up a quick poll question here. And this basically just helps us understand, I've got that opened up. So if you could just respond to the poll question here, this just helps us understand where are you folks, where our audience is relative to the network transformation. Are you just kind of thinking about it, doing researching, designing? Maybe you've started your implementation. Maybe you're partway through that implementation and trying to figure out what's next. Maybe you're what you think well through your implementation. Maybe you've almost finished. and maybe just got a couple of finishing touches you need to deal with. And lastly, of course, is your transformation is complete. You've already made the transition completely and moved over. And last but not least is unknown, or it's just not applicable to your particular situation. So I thank you all for responding to that. We've got just a little over half of you have responded. So I'll just give you another few seconds to do that. Again, researching, designing, started implementation, well through your implementation, your transformation is complete, or you're unknown, or it's not applicable. So, okay, looks like we've slowed down here. All right, I am gonna wrap it up and let's look at the results here. All right, so research and designing, you're definitely in the right place here. We got 36%. Started implementation, you're at 31%. Well through the implementation is 12%. 5% say that the transformation is complete, and 17% is not applicable or unknown. So that's a good kind of mix. I think we got the right audience on the call here today, gentlemen. So that's great news. All right, so now let's move on to our agenda. So we're going to talk next about our network transformation strategy, our top 5 best practices, some of the available solutions, and then your questions. So, all right, so let's skip over that. All right, let's move on and talk about network transformation. So we've put together the strategy. I think should probably ring true with a lot of people. There is the forgotten central office, right? These little, buildings are tucked away in all kinds of urban, suburban, rural areas. And last count, there's some 25,000 of these central offices across the United States. About 5,000 of them under 5,000 lines. A lot of them were built in the 70s to the 90s when digital switches first came out, right? The 5Es and some of the, Nortel equipment. And, they've been providing this connectivity to homes and businesses ever since then in all these different settings. And so, they're tried and true places, but they've got some aging switching equipment usually in them, almost without missing a beat. I visited one here in our local community a little while ago, and sure enough, there was an old 5E sitting in the corner, still humming away, providing the telephone service, Centrex service, believe it or not, to an amusement park that was in town. And this equipment's definitely reaching the end of life. It's very, very difficult to get support, spare parts, and this is a real driver. We've heard that more and more. And even harder is trying to get the expertise, to find a college student, pull them out of school and teach them how to use, this older command line equipment is tough. They're power hungry. They use a lot of electricity, take a lot of maintenance, and frankly, they're missing a lot of the mandated features, right? This, here in the U.S., Kerry's law and what we're doing with stir shaken and some of those other mandated services has really put a lot of this equipment at a serious disadvantage. They're also huge targets for fraud and spoofing and a lot of the bad behavior on the robocall front. And then lastly, you have to figure out, how am I going to keep these customers, right? If I've got a subscriber who's been paying for a line for 20 some odd years, I just got to be careful to figure out what to do so that I don't lose that customer. So what is the future? And so what we've kind of come up with a strategy that includes, addressing sort of the customer retention problem. And this boils down to, we had an interview with one of our case study customers, which we'll talk about, HKT Telecom, and he provided some real interesting insight. And he said, the more you make your customer do, the greater the chances they'll start shopping around. So the point being, for example, if you have to ship out an ATA or a new IP phone, or ask the customer to reprogram their switch or router, there's a good chance that they're going to start hunting around looking for a different solution. So you got to make it really, really simple, and that eliminates some truck rolls, which are expensive. And, these customer self-installs are just ticking time bombs. And I'm a pretty technical guy, and Verizon sent me a box and told me to install it on my own. And I kind of screwed it up too. So I had to call for help. So even the experts can do it. So what are we talking about here for network transformation? A legacy switch here in the core of this diagram here, it's got 2 sides on the switch. There's usually blades or maybe a shelf inside that switch one that's facing the trunks and another one that's facing the access side that goes to the subscribers. And there's usually SS7 and TDM circuits that come in from the international, national, or interconnect providers that go into the trunk side of the switch. And on the subscriber side, we'll have, some kind of residential circuits, FXS maybe, or PRIs, or GR303, or enterprises, big enterprises, maybe with a T1 or a DS3. This all goes to the legacy switch. And of course, all the intelligence and smarts is in that switch. Well, the migration takes you to this new model where whether you instead of the switch being in a central office, we can either put it in a data center, a private cloud, or theoretically even in a public cloud. And we've got a number of alliance partners that have been working with the soft switch partners that we've been working with. Metaswitch being a big important partner to TelcoBridges, Alianza, NetSapiens, SignalWire, Colmasoft. A lot of these have switching platforms that can provide the smarts. But what we're doing is we're replacing that old TDM switch with just some data infrastructure. We're going to put data switching in the central office, and we're going to put gateways on either side of it to provide connectivity to those legacy international, national, or interconnects. And then on the access side, we're going to use gateways again to provide access to to your subscribers. And this has all kinds of benefits that we'll talk about. Bigger, more diverse applications, you can start to mix in SIP trunks through session border controller solutions. You can eliminate some of the access if you've got SIP-based customers with their SIP trunks, for example. And then, the branch remote central offices then don't need trunk access anymore. Now all that can come over your IP network and can have calls go from CO to CO over IP. So all really big, powerful tools. And this transformation has some great drivers that really push the thing. Well, first of all, I get rid of that old equipment. Now you start to use a soft switch and you get access to all the new features that it brings. You can push that up into the cloud, or you can push it into a private data center, or like I said, for those class 5 features. You minimize the customer disruption. We showed by using gateways on the access side, the customer doesn't have to do anything. You just keep those TDM circuits going to the customer. And now you can start to leverage some of the power of SIP, right? SIP peering with your interconnects, SIP trunking for your customers. I got these new high value features for the customer. And one of the more interesting things is now all of a sudden you've significantly reduced your power consumption and battery needs, air conditioning, all these kinds of things. And in some cases, these soft switch vendors move to usage-based financial models for the software. So instead of having to pay one big, large upfront price for this transition, you can do it based on, the number of subscribers or the number of trunks, or, usage-based factors. So it really, really shifts the whole thing. So now let's move and let's talk about these top 5 best practices. And I'm going to turn it over to David. And David, you can walk us through your top 5 best practices you've learned in all the years of your experience. So go ahead.
Thank you, Alan. We at ZT have done a few of these, and we've learned going through these that you must decide what your success looks like. Are you going to have any customer complaints? Are you going to have a good vendor to work with? Are you going to have a good switching platform to go to? That's just some of the things you have to look at to make sure you have a successful migration. You have to identify all your nuances of your current infrastructure and perform a detailed evaluation of available IP switches, Metaswitch being one. Metaswitch is a good switch. A lot of our partners and a lot of our customers are using the Metaswitch along with TelcoBridges gateways. What you should do, you have to look at all these and see which one you like the best, which one will offer you and your customers the features and options that you need for a good migration. You have to identify a trusted partner with TDM experience to perform your migration outside of your daily operations. In other words, do you have the people that can do both, or do you need help on maybe you'll have somebody else like ZT do your migration completely and your translations? Do you have the people that still know your translations? One of our customers, actually the main translations guy that knew everything about their dialing plan, their features, he had retired, and they didn't have anybody that knew the translations, and they were right in the middle of their migrations. We at ZT took over and we did all the customers' translations for them after we understood their dialing plan. We did we actually built their 988 suicide prevention line or line for them for the FCC. Also at ZT, or if you decide to go with ZT or another, can they do your daily operations? Like, can they do the translations that had new customers? Can they do the troubleshooting for both hardware? Can they perform traces throughout the switch, whether it be a DMS 100 or 5ESS, a GTD5, whatever? You need to develop a communication plans after you have identified what vendor you're going to use, or if you're going to use a vendor, or what type of IP solution you're going to use. You need to have the phone numbers of everyone that you need to talk to, including your customers, your large Centrix customers, if you have any, your 911, your hospitals, any other important big emergency type customer you have in the switch. You need to develop a detailed migration plan, which is going to be your methods of procedure, your MOP. You need to go over that MOP, go through it, do a test on your MOP. You need to develop and execute an extensive post-migration plan. In other words, you have to have all your test numbers for every type of trunk group that the customer may have. Let's say you're going to have a remote that only out of this one remote, they can dial a certain NXX. You have to make sure that the customers all are doing 10-digit dialing. One of our customers, they allowed both 7 and 10-digit dialing, while the IP solution had theirs set at 10 digits, and they couldn't dial 7-digit. And so there was a lot of customer complaints. Could we go to the next slide, please,
Yeah,
Alan?
sure. No, that sounds like, developing a long-term plan is an important first step, right? You need to have a map so you know where you're going. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
Number 2. All right, start
Next
at the
generation.
bottom.
Oh, okay. In other words, how are you going to do this migration? Are you going to do cap your TDM type switch and grow it from all your new customers into your voice over IP type switch? Are you going to migrate it all in one night? You're going to do it gradually. Are you going to cut maybe one remote on Monday, and the following Monday, then another remote? Are you going to cut your large customers, your hospital, your 911 bureau, whatever? You just have to make sure that how you're going to do this migration.
Mhm.
Are you going to do a network consolidation? Are you going to consolidate both switches into the same network and just share the IPs? You're going to share your point codes for SS7. That's another thing. You have to make sure your SS7 is working out of both switches to allow this, if you're going to do it that way.
Got it. Yeah, it's starting at the bottom seems to make sense. All right,
Yes.
we'll move on.
Yes.
Okay.
The most you have to avoid any subscriber interruptions or disruption. You have to, your current deployment statistics and architecture, you have to make sure you understand. I talk with my hands. You have to understand all your customers. You have to let them know what you're doing, what's going to happen. You have to tell them your proposed deployment of how you're going to migrate them from the old TDM type switch to a new IP type switch. You're going to have to let them know of any new features you want to have compared to their old features. You have to actually train your customers on their new type switch if there's any differences. Let's say they do have a on-my call distribution group that allows the supervisor to monitor calls. Will that new switch allow that also? Do you have to identify key risks and dependencies on your conversion? In other words, make sure your 911 trunks are working. Make sure your fire department is working. Make sure your hospitals are all okay. You have to go through and identify any capital and operational expenses with this conversion. Make sure you have the capital to do what you want to do and develop a proposed timeline. In other words, if you want to do this within 12 months, you have to space it out for every whatever time period that you decide on.
Right. No, I think that this subscriber interruption is a common problem, as we talked about. All right.
Exactly. And the subscriber interruption, maybe the features are going to work just a little bit different than they did on your TDM switch, on your IP switch.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some horror stories in there. All right. So number 4.
You have to focus on your value-added services. They're performed to meet your customer demands. Make sure your customers actually know what value-added services they had today and what they're going to be able to have tomorrow. What services do the customers want? Do they want what they have today? They want the new features, or are they just going to be happy with what they had? And your migration supports new service revenue opportunities. Go through and try to explain to all your customers any new features that they can have with your IP type switches.
Yeah, that's probably important too, because if they don't see the value in moving to this new network switch from their perspective, then they'll just, then they find it as questionable. So plus it's probably additional revenue opportunity, right?
Yes, exactly. Another big one is what you mentioned earlier, is about your air conditioning and your power. A lot of the power companies actually are offering your larger service providers a bonus if they use less power and cut to a different type switch.
Right. Yeah, we'll go there. We'll talk about that in the Q&A in more detail. It's awesome.
Okay.
All right, vendors.
This is a big one. Choose vendors for the long road ahead. Long-term strategy for success. Your interconnect negotiations and arrangements. Standard intervals for negotiations be lengthy, and especially if I just had my computer's trying to do an update. I got to stop it.
Yeah, the standard intervals to negotiate are lengthy, and I think we see that at firsthand. We have customers come to us all the time and said, "My vendor suddenly pivoted, and now all of a sudden I got to find another vendor." Anyway, you all set?
Yes, your point code. You have to get your point code in for the new type switch. Also, after you get into migration, you have to make sure you have the space for your where you're going to put your whether it be a meta switch, TelcoBridges type gateway, secure and build backhaul transport on your both switches. Make sure that if you've only cut say 1,000 customers from your TDM to your meta switch, the other 1,000 can still call each other. Your fiber builds, make sure you have enough capacity out. And what is the end of life policy on both the TDM and your IP switch?
Yep. No, we see that all the time.
I know I've gone through this pretty quick, and if any questions you guys have on any of what I've said, make sure you put it in on your question and answer.
Sure. Yeah. No, we encourage them to do so. Yep, absolutely. So a couple final thoughts, I think that I got from talking to you both, Michael and David, as we get in there. So Michael, do you want to just cover these final thoughts then?
I'll do it quickly because I think we want to get to the questions and answer part. But
Yeah.
I've spent most of my career from the AT&T Western Electric days extending the life of legacy equipment. Back then, I fundamentally believed that, like an old car, as long as you can keep it running and moving, you can keep it forever. But the reality is there does come a time when you can no longer support the old legacy equipment. And I think basically what I see is the trends, and that we're actually at an inflection point. It is getting much, much harder to support the legacy equipment, primarily because of the lack of expertise. And I think Alan did a great job explaining about you can't get a young college kid to learn about the TDM stuff. It's not going to happen. The same way I get lost when I go inside a Tesla and I see this large screen saying, how am I going to drive this car? So there really is a real issue regarding expertise and talent going forward and supporting the legacy equipment. And the other thing is that we are seeing it's getting harder and harder to get equipment. What we're also seeing is little things like, as companies divest their assets, people don't know what the routing tables are. People don't know what the passwords are. One of the biggest problems that we see is fans, filters, power supplies, that they can't be repaired, that you're looking for the scrap pile, see if you can find additional equipment. Disk drives on legacy OS systems, it's hard to replace the disk drives. People don't want to spend the money to go to solid state drives. So we're really at an inflection point where we need to do something. Now, as I said before, I was a big proponent about extending the life. But there does come a time in the life cycle of a product that you really have to consider the business case to get off that product and figure out the migration strategy. And I think that we're fundamentally there. I mean, the FCC had talked about in 2011 that the death of the PSTN would be in 2018. Then it would be in 2022. We are nearly at the point, at the crossroads, that I'm not saying you need to rip out the equipment today, but you have to start thinking about it, doing the business case, working with partners, and figuring out what the right strategy is. What you don't want to do is have two separate networks, a TDM network and an IP network. That'll increase your OpEx expenditures. So you really have to start looking at the network in total and figure out, based on some of the conversations, based on some of the input today, what's it going to take to move forward off the existing TDM or minimize its overall impact. I think we make a great team with TelcoBridges, and that's why we wanted to partner with them. We see the future, and the future is this. And the smarter companies and the smarter individuals will start planning for it now. I'll turn it over to you, Alan.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much. And we got loads of case studies on our website that share some of these points that we've gone through here. But we also have some information on our products. I can't finish the webinar without talking a little bit about the table stakes that TelcoBridges brings to the table. Of course, that includes our signaling and media gateway portfolio from our TMG 800 and 3200, 7800, different scales, both signaling and media gateway configurations. And of course, our SBC family with Pro SBC, Pro SBC Plus, and our professional services to hold all that together. From our gateway family, we've spanned this huge spectrum of scalability from a single T1E1 all the way up to 16 STM1s. So a huge scale that we can handle with virtually any service provider solution. And some of those service providers we've worked with are on the slide here. And one particular one I want to point out is HKT. Last year, we finished a huge network transformation with them. You can find details on that. It'll be in the follow-up email, but also on our website under the case study section, customer success stories. you'll learn about how HKT ripped out some old Fujitsu switches and replaced them with a nice new modern Metaswitch network that is based on our media gateways to provide the connectivity to their interconnects and their subscribers. And they were able to save millions of dollars in electrical fees. They earned huge credits from the government, and they earned awards for their energy savings. And now they have a nice modern programmable network, and they were able to do it without disrupting their customers. So definitely look that one up. So with that, we're going to move to our Q&A section and just kind of a wrap up. If you're interested in talking with either TelcoBridges or with ZT about any of these solutions and set up an appointment, we got a landing page we set up at www.telcobridges.com/all caps TDM 2IP. And you can go there and fill a form out, tell us what you're up to, and that'll help us get the conversation moving. But in the meantime, we got some other contact information there, and we'll start to look at the Q&A panel here. And I'm going to start with one that was sent via email before the conference here from our friends at Ziply that were asking, how do service providers that are making the transition to IP handle mandated survivability functions? And so, Michael, I'm going to turn that to you first.
I'm sorry, I missed some of it.
Yeah. So how do service providers that are moving to IP handle the survivability mandates? Keeping a remote central office alive in the case it gets severed from the IP connections.
Well, I think I'm going to punt and give it to Dave to answer that
Okay.
one. He's more technical in that respect.
Okay.
They all have a back way. They have something called emergency standalone capabilities. In other words, you'll have another back door going out, and they can call within their remote normally, but until they get the main link back together, they won't be able to call out of their own remote. It's called, as I said, it's called the ESA, emergency standalone.
Yep. ESA proxy sits at the remote central office in its own server, and it provides that survivability backup. So,
yes.
Okay. Let's see. I've got a question here. Let's see from Art asking about can we discuss the TMG 800 translations? If not, can we set up a meeting? So yeah, so the maybe I'll just I'll take a punt here on this one with that Art. So maybe I think what you're looking for is how the TMG can do some of the dial plan manipulation and routing within that. And you can summarize it as, the very sophisticated routing engine within all the TMG products. And one of the things you can do is you can put load a table into the TMG that'll allow you to convert from telephone number A to telephone number B, destinations, et cetera. And we cover a lot of that in our technical training material. So maybe we can set you up with our support team, can send you to some of the recorded training videos. They can show you exactly how that all works. So I wish I could give you some more detail on it, but I think that'll have to do. All right. Let's see. From Jose asked a question, TelcoBridges share the best practice of migrations that have been deployed. And yeah, that's a great question. We can probably, our case studies is probably the best answer to that. Jose, we'll send you off a couple of case study examples, but you can find them right now if you want on our website under the case study section. I think that'll probably point you in the right direction. That'll get you going, but we'll add some to that follow-up email. Ernest says, thanks for the informative session. And I think we answered your question about how's resilience handled in SIP trunks with Pro SBC. It's usually done with some kind of SIP proxy that either learns or is programmed with a dial plan so they can figure out where to send the call in the case of an outage. All right, so Jose then asked another question saying, what obstacles have been found in the migrations with remote sites having access issues, terrain, location, how is diversity dealt with during a migration without having to deploy multiple fiber routes? I think that's the same question again, right? Is survivability either from links going down or infrastructure failing? That remote branch offices or COs need to have some kind of resilience strategy with either proxy or this ESA we talked about.
And another thing, Alan, they should have is a good test plan when they do your migration to make sure you can reach all these different numbers before and after the migration.
That's a good point. Yep. Probably never hurts to do a test fail too, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. Pull the plug and see what happens, as they say.
Yep.
So, Anonymous, can you elaborate on the professional services we offer? Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a professional services team as part of our support function that is available for professional services. They do it by the hour. You can buy bundles or packages of professional services from as little as 5 hours up to, sky's the limit. And it's charged at an hourly rate. It's the same people who do all the support. So they've earned quite a bit of respect from our customers and helping our customers with either custom configurations or installations, diagnostic of network issues that the customer can't figure out, and our team can come in with some specialized tools and help figure it out. So the range is the gamut. We're happy to help. All right. Another question where we're looking into a combination of a TSG 800 and 3200. Where only a TSG is only used for providing SS7 gateway. Yeah, matter of fact, our gateways can provide both signaling and media gateway functionality at the same time. We should get together and talk about that, because that is one of the powers of those gateways. We can get together and talk about that. So Jose, expect a follow-up call, and we'll get together and talk about that. Can a media gateway serve as an ESA server? And the answer to that is no. Especially in a Metaswitch situation, we would set up one of their Metaswitch ESA servers as a proxy in a separate server, and that would sit next door to the gateway and provide that. So Rudy S, is DNS text going to be considered for resilience and failover, sort of what NetSapiens uses for primary to secondary registrations? There are definitely deployment situations in an all IP environment where we are seeing DNS being used as a failover mechanism. Matter of fact, one of our other case study customers, AirCall, uses that. It's all DNS based failover. And that seems to work out real well for them, but you need to keep the configuration of the 2 or 3 SBCs. You have to manage the configuration closely, right? They have to stay in sync with each other. So there's a little bit of configuration up front that needs to be done. Let's see. How Ernest asks, how is integration with diameter done with SIP trunks? Setbacks with billing after migration with SIP trunks. Yeah, matter of fact, that's a problem that we've seen solved a handful of times, where a billing system uses diameter or it's a radius-based billing, and when you move to IP, you sort of say, well, where do we get the radius or the diameter information from? And that's one of the functions that our Pro SBC can handle, or our media gateways. We can feed a radius stream to a billing system and get you that information about the calls that pass through the device, and that can be homologated in with the rest of the billing information. We've seen that integrated with a number of different billing systems. It seems to do the trick. I don't know if you guys have got anything add to that, any billing tricks. All right, so the question of the month, when is TDM going to die? Listen, I thought 20 years ago fax was going to die any minute now, and I was at my doctor's office the other day and they said, "Oh, we got to fax it to your other doctor." So I don't know what to tell you. I will say one thing I think that we didn't cover in some of the presentation material. We have one of our case studies is Wabash Co-op in Illinois. And I know, David, that's in your neck of the woods. I don't know if you've ever run across them, but it's a small co-op operator. And because they're a co-op, their subscribers aren't just subscribers, they're members. And to do anything major to the network, they have to go back to their subscribers / members and get them to pony up basically an assessment. It's kind of like an HMO or HOA, I should say. So it's really, really got to be worth it, or really, really have to be mandated. And they'll be very, very creative. And they have been in that particular case study with how to implement stir shaken. And they were able to implement that with one of our pro SPCs and another software partner, TransNexus, to add stir shaken onto their somewhat aging switch. So there's a lot to be done. So anyway,
well,
yeah,
I can foresee these TDM type switches staying working if the customer group does not want any of these advanced features. If they can still get the replacement equipment for their DTCs and a DMS 100, or their line equipment in a 5E ESS, if they can still get the equipment and the customers are happy with the services they have and they don't want any of the new features, why kill the TDM?
Yeah, I always come from a business point of view, and then basically it's a business case. I don't think you'll see the PSTN fundamentally die. It will basically be removed out of the network in increments. If the cost of owning and running a TDM network is too expensive, you're going to make the financial decision to move forward to gain access to new revenue sources. We're seeing, and one of the reasons we've been successful is that the phone companies are losing a lot of their talent. Yep. People who are in our age group, and I'm saying that as a positive, not as a negative, people are leaving jobs or either getting ripped in some companies or retiring or other cases. And it's getting harder and harder to maintain it. And that comes to a point where you've got to make the fundamental business decision. Do I maintain two networks? Do I stay on one network? Or do I bite the bullet and make the network transformation exist? Right. It really is more a business issue than an engineering issue, because things are getting harder and harder to support. We see it every day. And that's why we're still in business after 20 years.
Yes. The metaphor I use is when you go to Lowe's or the hardware store and you see all those plumbing parts, that's what we do. We convert from copper to plastic to PVC to PEX. That's basically what we do, is we do the conversion. So two last questions here. Terrence asks a great one. It says, what do we suggest for GR303, since our gateways today do not support that? So stay tuned, Terrence. That's all I can tell you. I think there's some big news coming. So hold that thought. And lastly, Rudy comments here. This is the statement for the day. TDM can't die until enough fiber bandwidth is deployed in the rural America or rural areas. Absolutely, totally agree. I think it's when the infrastructure in rural America, which, a lot of that's been funded through, the federal government over the last 10 or 15 years. There's money there to, internet connected rural America, and that'll make a big difference. And that'll get rid of a lot of those old aging 5E switches that are tucked away in remote counties. So, all right, I'm going to call it at that. I'm going to say, first of all, I just want to tell, first of all, Michael and David, I just want to thank you so much for bringing your expertise to the table here, not only today, but also as part of our Alliance partnership. I think it's going to be great to have your team available to help our customers do these kinds of migrations and help with the planning and execution. So thanks for both of you.
Thank you, Alan.
Welcome, thank you,
we
Alan.
just won't come to Buffalo in the winter time. That's the only thing we'll say.
Don't worry. We don't have a lot of problem with that. People showing up at the doorstep. All right. And I want to thank you to our audience for joining us today. It was really, really great having you. I appreciate all your time. And as always, we'll be following up with an email with a link to the recording and also a link to the slides so you can take a peek at it afterwards and remember. And if you posed a question here, one of our sales team will be reaching out to you in the next couple of days. And we so much appreciate your attention. Just so you're counting, this is webinar number 43 for TelcoBridges. So we've been busy. So thanks again. All right. With that, I'm going to wish everyone a good day. And that's it from here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Have a happy holiday. Bye now.
Yep.